whether you are alive or dead. So when you get up in the morning, it's like taking birth again. What we do today is what matters most. Okay, the today's quote, it's not true that people stop pursuing dreams because they grow old. They grow old because they stop pursuing dreams. So it depends on your way of living, right? A old person or a young person, it is not because of the age, but because of our attitude. Okay, whose birthday is today? The great scientist Niels Bohr, right? He was born today, 1882. And he was a Danish.
Sir, you are not presenting, sir. Sir.
It's not coming there, huh? Okay.
No, sir. No, sir.
Okay. And because the sharing is not. Now this is okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now could you see the screen? The slide? Is it okay?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, today is the birthday of the great scientist Niels Bohr. Niels Bohr was a Danish physicist who was the first to apply quantum theory, which restricts the energy of a system to certain discrete values like quanta, to the problem of atomic and molecular structure. For this work, he received the Nobel Prize for Physics in 1922. He developed the so-called Bohr theory of atom and liquid model of the nucleus. He went with the British research team to Los Alamos in the USA, where they continued to work on the project to make nuclear fission bomb. Actually, Los Alamos, this is the great lab where the nuclear, that bomb is made, and the great scientists are involved in that. Okay, they didn't want to have the destruction, but to use their knowledge, they have worked for it. And one of them is Niels Bohr, and another great scientist, I think you know Richard Feynman, right? Who is the author of Feynman's lecture series in physics. And he's a great scientist. If you come across a book, that's a nice book actually.
Surely you are not joking, Feynman, sir.
Yeah, surely you are not joking. Surely you are joking, Mr. Feynman. It's a fantastic book actually. Every chapter, it's a superb one. Okay, so don't miss it if you come across. Okay, then we go to the next. Another fellow is there. It's not coming here. Okay, Jahir Khan. He is the Indian cricketer who was also born today in 1978. And he was the most successful Indian pace bowler in Test cricket behind Kapil Dev. A left-arm fast-medium bowler, he was best known for his ability to move the ball both ways off the cricket and swing the old ball at some pace. He also has the distinct record of dismissing Graeme Smith, Kumar Sangakkara, Sanath Jayasuriya, and Matthew Hayden, the great cricketers, some of the game's most feared left-hand batsmen, over 10 times each in international cricket. So that is his record. Okay, now we go to lecture 21. And in the last class, we have seen the classification, and we have compared incompressible versus compressible. As I told, there is no incompressible fluid, but there are incompressible flows based on the Mach number of the flow. If the Mach number is very less, the variation in the density is negligible, and I can consider the flow to be incompressible. So most of the cases, many cases, we come across like a flow over various bodies like automobiles, aircrafts, all those things from high speeds also, as we have seen 300 kmph also, we can consider the flow to be incompressible. As I told, by assuming incompressible flow, one of the flow parameter can be reduced and the number of equations can be reduced, and the flow equations become simple to solve. So in fluid mechanics, you are studying Navier-Stokes equations and all. So when you see the variables like density, temperature, pressure, velocities, okay, these are the variables, and number of variables equal to number of equations. So if I can reduce one variable, I can reduce one equation, and the whole system of equations becomes simple to solve the problem. And then we discussed about positive displacement versus turbo machines, and the basic difference. Okay, positive displacement, we have discontinuity in the flow, and turbo machines we have steady flow. And when you switch off positive displacement, the fluid in that will have the same state because it is not exposed to the surroundings. But in turbo machine, when it is switched off, the flow is exposed to the atmosphere and its state changes to the surroundings. And so we will have high pressures for positive displacement and low pressure ratios turbo machines, but large flows in turbo machines, but low flows in positive displacement machines. And this is the way we can see, based on the application, we have to select which is better. So as I told, turbo machines are widely used when the large flows are needed, like power plants and other things, like reciprocating compressors, as I told, in household refrigerators, small things, small equipment, but high pressure I want. So then we go to positive displacement or reciprocating air compressors. And like gear pump, vane pump, such things, they are used for pumping the oils usually. And fans, blowers, and compressors, again, based on the pressure ratios, we classify them as fans, blowers, and compressors. They are compressible flows, and fans are for low pressure ratios, blowers are for medium pressure ratios, and compressors are for high pressure ratio. And again, as I told, pressure ratios and flows, they are inversely related. If I want large pressure ratio, I will get less flow. If I want large flows, I will get less pressure ratio. And then we discussed about SA versus CI engines. So we know that spark ignition engines are petrol engines, CI engines are diesel engines. And when you compare, the compression ratios are very high in CI engines, and SA engines very small. It is because of what is called as, actually both the engines, the efficiency increases with the compression ratio. But in SA engine, what happens is we are taking both air and fuel mixture into the cylinder during compression. And when it is compressed, it may burn by itself without any completion of the compression stroke. This is what is called as auto ignition. Before completing the power stroke, if the burning takes place, it pushes there will be hit on the piston, and it will get disturbed, what is called as knocking of the engine. So knocking takes place if I go for high compression ratios in SA engines. So that's why there is a restriction. But in CI engines, no problem. Only air is taken in. I can compress it to whatever extent I want. Then I inject the fuel. Okay, so there is no problem of auto ignition and knocking in CI engines. So I can go for high compression ratios. And practical cycles are having high compression ratios, and that's why high efficiency. And at the same time, because of high compression ratios, the engine will be heavy. It has to withstand high pressures. So because of that, heavy engines use CI engines, and lighter engines use SA engines. And okay, a lot of other comparisons come from that only. And another thing is SA engine will have what is called as quantity governing. If I want to increase the speed or decrease the speed, I change the amount of mixture that goes into the cylinder. So mixture is changed. The quantity of mixture going into the cylinder is changed. That's why it's called quantity governing. In CI engine, I change only fuel. Air is same. So air fuel ratio changes, or the quality of the mixture changes. That's why it's called as quality governing. Okay, that is another difference. And coming to four-stroke engines and two-stroke engines. Four-stroke engines, there will be only one power stroke in 4 strokes, and are 2 revolutions. In two-stroke engines, for every 2 strokes, there will be 1 power stroke, or for 1 revolution, there is a power stroke. That's why the power produced is high for the same weight in two-stroke engine. Power to weight ratio is high in two-stroke engines. But at the same time, because the no valves, through the ports, I am going to lose some of the mixture, and because of which efficiency will be less for two-stroke engines. But the construction is simple in two-stroke engine because of the valves and all. Four-stroke engine is complex in construction. In four-stroke engines, there will be heavy flywheel also, because only 1 power stroke for 4 strokes. I have to store the energy. The flywheel will be very large and it will be heavy. So four-stroke engines are heavy, two-stroke engines are light. So we use for light vehicles two-stroke engines like scooters, and four-stroke engines for cars, trucks and all. Then coming to IC engines and gas turbines, this is similar to positive displacement versus turbo machines, because IC engine is positive displacement, gas turbine is a turbo machine. So you can see that gas turbines, we can use cheaper fuels, they go for high speeds, power to weight ratio is very high, and no lubrication, no balancing, no vibrations, and all these things, it will be very simple. And the only complication in gas turbine, why people get doubt, so why IC engines are used in the automobiles, why not gas turbines can be used in the automobiles? Okay, so there is one difficulty in gas turbine. When it is not running at design condition, that is called as off design condition, OFF off design condition, then its efficiency is very poor. Okay, I have to run more time on the design condition only. But when you put it in automobile, we always change the speeds often because of the cars, traffic and all. So gas turbines are very poor in efficiency. But when you come to aircrafts, the variation of speed only comes in taking off and landing. The complete cruising will be at constant speed. So there will not be any problem of that. So gas turbines are used in aircrafts, but not in automobiles. But if you go to like race cars, like things, sometimes gas turbines are used because the high power to weight ratio. Okay, that is the difference. And gas turbine versus steam turbine. Okay, gas turbine, it's a very small one. Steam turbine is a huge steam power plant. You can see the big cooling towers, condensers, and all these things, boiler, very huge. Right? Gas turbine is a compact one. That is the main difference. The weight, space occupied, and all those things are very large for steam turbines, and it needs large water supply to run the steam power plant. Here it is not like that. But always the advantage comes with a disadvantage. Gas turbines are of low efficiency. Independently, if I use gas turbine, its efficiency is low. So I told you there are two reasons why gas turbines are less efficient. One, because 60% of the output is used to run the compressor. Compressor needs a lot of energy. And that is one reason. And another reason is the exhaust temperatures will be very high, and I am losing a lot of energy into the atmosphere. So only part of it only we get the power. And if I want to increase the gas turbine efficiency, then I will have what is called as combined cycle. So using the exhaust gases, I produce steam, and that steam runs the turbine, and some more power is produced, and the combined cycle power plant will have efficiencies up to 55 to 60%. Right, which cannot be met with any of the engines. Okay, and then coming to impulse and reaction turbines. And impulse turbine, the complete, actually in turbines, pressure energy is converted to kinetic energy, and kinetic energy to work. And pressure energy to kinetic energy, if there is every impulse turbine and reaction turbine, there will be a stator and a rotor. I am going fast because you already know a little bit in your BME. So every stage will have a stator and a rotor. If all the conversion pressure to kinetic energy takes place only in the stator, which is nozzle, then we call it as impulse turbine. If it is conversion takes place partly in the stator and partly in the rotor, then we call it as reaction turbine. So there will be pressure and velocity remain constant in the rotor of impulse turbine. But reaction turbine, both in the stator and rotor, there will be decrease of pressure. Okay, that is a main difference. And because of that, impulse rotors are of symmetric type or bucket type, and reaction rotors are aerofoil type. Right? So because of that, impulse turbines are cheaper and easy to construct, but reaction turbines are costly. Because of aerofoil shape, the manufacturing, everything will be very costly. But reaction turbines are more efficient comparing to impulse turbines. Okay, each has its own advantages and disadvantages. And impulse turbine, pressure ratios are very high. Reaction turbines, pressure ratios are very less. So impulse turbines are used when the pressure ratios are very high. Like if you compare gas turbines and steam turbines, gas turbine engine pressure ratio will be around maximum 30, 40 like that. But steam turbines pressure ratios goes up to 200, 300 like that. So steam turbines use impulse turbines, gas turbines use reaction turbines. All these are very important when you come to turbo machines subject, right? You have to know the difference, right? This you have to remember. Steam turbines use impulse turbines, gas turbines use reaction turbines. Okay, and again, in the impulse turbines, we have seen there is compounding, velocity compounding, pressure compounding and all. And I am not going into the details, but you have to know the difference and when it is applied, and what are the advantages, disadvantages, the comparison between them, all of them you have to know. Okay, and we have done a multi-stage compressor problem. So this is a multi-staging one with a nice figure. So just you can recollect. Here, this is bigger one is LPC, low pressure compressor. The smaller one is HPC, high pressure compressor. And air comes with suction conditions P1 and T1 into the cylinder. So this is what is that? This suction, it goes from here to here, right? And here it gets, both valves are closed and it gets compressed to B, right? And at that time, if it goes further, then this valve gets opened and it is pushed out of the cylinder, and that is delivery. Okay, so B to G, there will be delivery. And after that, it comes back, whatever in the clearance volume, it gets expanded, and again, the cycle gets repeated. And here, its pressure is increased to intermediate pressure, which is Px, and it is compressed to Tx temperature. So temperature goes above and increase, and that Tx, because increase in temperature reduces the efficiency or increases the work needed. So I want to cool it, and I will have what is called as intercooler. In the intercooler, it is constant pressure intercooling, right? So it comes from B to C like this. It is constant pressure intercooling. And here in the TS diagram, these are two pressure lines. This is P1 pressure, this is Px pressure, this is P2 pressure, constant pressure lines. And here the A starts and it is compressed, and this is adiabatic. If it is isentropic, it is straight. It is adiabatic, it is going like this. And B to C, there will be constant pressure cooling. This is along constant pressure line. It comes down to the original temperature T1. So here Px Tx it enters and it comes out Px T1. And here it sucks the high pressure cylinder. So it goes from G to C, right? This is suction. Now that is compression. And so this is compression. This compression. So D is here, right? So this is compressed and this is delivered, and again it comes back to complete the cycle. So here C to D is the compression, right? C to D, and it is coming again. So I am getting delivery pressure P2, but because of compression again there is temperature increase T2, and many times we will have another cooler here similar to intercooler, what is called as after cooler, because I am cooling it after the compression. That is called as after cooler. Why we use the after cooler is whatever air is sucked, it is taken from the atmosphere, which will have water vapor in it. So when if it is high temperature, no problem. When it is cooled, what happens is whatever vapor is water vapor is there, it gets condensed, and there will be water in the receiver. So I don't want it. When I want to use it for some practical purpose like drying purpose, I don't want water vapor coming out of it, or that water is coming out of it. So I have to drain it. I want dry air. So to have dry air, I will have after cooler here, where this P2 T2 becomes P2 T1 again. And so whatever is drained, condensed, that is drained in the after cooler itself, and I will supply dry air to the receiver. Okay, so this is D to D dash. Okay, it is not shown here. Here there is after cooler. This T2 becomes T1. Okay, so that is process constant pressure cooling. Okay, this is the way it works. Any doubts you can ask me. Otherwise, I will go to the problems. Okay, this is a single stage reciprocating air compressor problem. And a single stage reciprocating air compressor has a swept volume of 2000 centimeter cube and runs at 800 RPM. It operates on a pressure ratio of 8. Okay, P2 by P1 is 8 with a clearance of 5% of swept volume. That is VC is 0.05. And okay, I can do like this. Okay, I could not connect it properly. Okay, I think Okay. So it runs at 800 RPM. It operates on a pressure ratio of 8 with a clearance volume of 5% of sept volume. Assume NTP room conditions and at inlet T equal to 101.3 kilopascal and T equal to 15 degrees centigrade. Okay, there is a small confusion in many books. These NTP conditions, in some books it writes at 0 degrees centigrade, which is STP actually, and sometimes it writes 15 degrees centigrade, sometimes 25 degrees centigrade, or sometimes 20 degrees centigrade. Actually, according to the internet information, 20 degrees centigrade is the NTP condition. But if you see books, in some books they use 15 degrees centigrade, in some books 25 degrees centigrade. Okay, anyhow, here in this problem, it is given as NTP conditions or room conditions, same, and which is at 15 degrees centigrade. Okay, and polytropic compression and expansion index is n equal to 1.25. That is, compression and expansion both have the same index. Sometimes it may be different, then the problem will be a little bit more complex. Okay, so I have to calculate indicated power. So indicated power is nothing but the power required or the power of the obtained from the area. Why it is called indicated power is usually this diagram can be obtained using an instrument called indicator connected to the cylinder of the compressor. So when you connect it, it will draw the PV diagram. So this is what is called as indicator diagram. PV diagram is also called as indicator diagram. And the area of the indicator diagram is called as indicated power. Okay, so that's why it is called indicated power, or it is power required to drive the compressor. Okay, and there is a volumetric efficiency, mass flow rate, free air delivered, isothermal efficiency, and the actual power needed to drive the compressor if mechanical efficiency is 0.85. Actually, the power required is indicated power, but when you connect it to a motor, there may be transmission losses, mechanical efficiency. In gas turbines also, you will use mechanical efficiency. And similarly, here we have some mechanical efficiency of 0.85, right? So that is, my motor has to supply more work, means the indicated power by 0.85 is the power that is to be developed by the motor. Okay, so that is it you have to remember. Okay, now we will see how the problem is done. And this is the indicator diagram. And so here, P1 equal to 101.3 kilopascals, that is 1 atmosphere. And pressure ratio is given 8. So P2 is equal to 8 P1. So this is delivery pressure. And T1 equal to 288 Kelvin, that is 15 degrees centigrade. And swept volume is 2000 centimeter cube. Okay, swept volume means stroke volume, that is from V1 minus V3. V1 is cylinder volume, V3 is clearance volume. So the piston moves from this point to this point, which is the stroke volume or swept volume. Okay, and the suction volume is V1 minus V4. From the suction starts from 4 to 1. Okay, so the total cylinder volume is clearance volume plus stroke volume. You have to remember this terminology. Okay, so the stroke volume is given 2000 centimeter cube. So clearance volume is given 5% of the stroke volume. So 0.05 Vs, that is 100 centimeter cube. So the total cylinder volume is Vc plus Vs, which is 2100 centimeter cube. And next what I have to find out is, actually I want to find out what is the suction volume. So for this I want to find out what is V4, right? And so this is because PV power n equal to constant. So P3 by P4 and V3 by V4, they are related. So I can find out P3 V3 power n equal to P4 V4 by n. So V4 I can find out as P3 by P4 to the power of 1 by n. So I know V3, which is clearance volume, and P3 by P4 is 8, and 1 by n is 1 by 1.25. I can find out what is V4. So that is suction volume V1 minus V4 is 2100, this cylinder volume, minus 528, it gives 1572 centimeter cube. Okay, now we know that for a cylinder with clearance volume, the work is n by n minus 1, P1 into V1 minus V4 into P2 by P1 to the power of n minus 1 by n minus 1. And n by n minus 1, 0.25, 1.25 by 0.25. And T1, this is, you have to put it in kilopascals. or he has put it in pascals. If it is put in pascals, I will get it in joules. If I put it in kilopascals, I will put in kilojoules. So 101.3 into 10 cube. Okay, these are total pascals into the V1 minus V4, which is 1572 calculated here. It is in meter cube into 10 power minus 6. And P2 by P1 is 8 to the power of 0.2 by 25 by 1.25 minus 1. So this is 411 joules. Okay, this is work per one revolution. Okay, so one stroke. But the speed is given as 800 revolutions per minute. So if I put 800 by 60 per second, okay, so many because for each revolution there will be one delivery. Okay, so 800 revolutions, 800 deliveries per minute, deliveries per minute. So per second by 60. And into 10 power minus 3 to make it kilowatts. Otherwise, I will get watts. So 5.47 kilowatts is the indicated power or work required by the compressor. And volumetric efficiency V1 minus V4 by Vs, right? That is, so this is the volume by the stroke volume, because I have to get theoretically stroke volume of air, but I am getting only suction volume of air. So suction volume by stroke volume. So that is okay. So 1572 by 2000 into 100. This is volumetric efficiency. And mass of air compressed per cycle. So per cycle, this much of volume is compressed. So M is equal to PV by RT. P is anyhow this, and V is the V1 minus V4, whatever is air that is compressed, and by 287 and 288, okay, RT. So I will get this much mass flow of air. And this is per cycle, but again, 800 revolutions are there per minute. So into 800, so 1.54 kgs per minute. And if you are asked per second, again divide by 60. So it depends on how it is asked. Okay, this is mass compressed per cycle. This is per minute. Okay, and free air delivery. So this is V1 minus V4 is the free air delivered into 800. So this is 1.26 meter cube per minute. This is mass and this is volume, right? So free air delivery, it is volume. And isothermal efficiency, if I want, I have to find out isothermal power. So P1 into V1 minus V4 log P2 by P1. So P1 and V1 minus V4 we calculated, and P2 by P1 log 8. So 331 joules. This is for isothermal. And we already found out indicated power 5.47 kilowatts, right? So 0.331, this is in kilojoules, and 5.47 into 60, because this is in kilowatts, I want it in joules. So I put again this 800 by 60, and that is 80.7%. This is isothermal efficiency. And input power from the motor. So as I told, this is required by the compressor because of the mechanical transmission losses. I have to divide this by 0.85. So I have to supply more power, 6.44 kilowatts. Okay, this is the way I have to find out what is the power required to drive the compressor. This is a single stage, and two stage, already we have done one problem, but one more problem we will see. Here we take the situation where intake conditions and NTP conditions are different. Okay, so the intake conditions of a single acting two-stage air compressor running at 300 RPM are 0.98 bar and 305 Kelvin. Okay, these are P1 and T1, that is here. Okay, and the delivery pressure is 20 bar. Here, this delivery pressure is 20 bar. The intermediate pressure is 5 bar. Actually, this is given intermediate pressure also. If it is not given, I have to take the geometric mean of these two. Okay, root of 20 into 0.98. But he has designed for to have an intermediate pressure as 5 bar. And the clearance volume of the low pressure compressor, that is LPC, is 4% of the stroke volume. Okay, the compressor delivers 3 meter cube per minute at 1 bar and 25 degrees centigrade. So this is the NTP condition he is taking. So, and determine the power required to drive the compressor, the low pressure cylinder dimensions, and isothermal efficiency. Okay, these are the things asked. And okay, this is the indicator diagram, and this is 0.98 bar, and this is 5 bar, and this is 20 bar. Okay, so like the same thing here. So V3 by V4, that is 0.04. This is the clearance ratio, right? So V3, that is clearance volume, is equal to 0.04 times the stroke volume. And so total cylinder volume is clearance volume plus stroke volume. So 1 plus 0.04, 1.04 times the stroke volume. Again, the same thing. If I want to find out V4 by V3, that is V4 by V3 is equal to P3 by P4 to the power of 1 by n. Right? So P3 is 5 and P4 is 0.98 and V3 is 0.04, that is clearance volume Vs to the power of, this is 0.14 Vs. And the volume of air taken in at 0.98 bar and 305 Kelvin, that is at the suction conditions, that is V1 minus V4. So V1 minus V4 is, V1 is 1.04 Vs and this is 0.14. So this is the amount of suction air that is taken. So volume of air taken under free air conditions. As I told, I have to correct it. P1 TA by PA T1, I have to multiply. So this is P1 T1 are the suction conditions, PA TA are NTP conditions. So I have to multiply this by P1 TA by PA T1. So that is done here. So I got the free air delivered, volume of air taken at free air conditions. So volume of volumetric efficiency is equal to, this is the suction volume by the stroke volume. It gives 86.1%. And similarly, mass of air delivered, PV by RT. And so mass of air delivered is given as 3 meter cube per minute here. Yeah. The compressor delivers 3 meter cube per minute at 1 bar and 25 degrees centigrade. So that we put here. And pressure is only 1 kilopascal and 3 into 10 power 5 by RT. And per second, if you take, we will get this mass of air delivered per kg per second. And if I want to find out what is the intercooling, and also what is that it is asked, it has to find out, okay, a low pressure cylinder dimensions. Okay, T2 by T1 is equal to P2 by P1 to the power of n minus 1 by n. I can find out what is T2. And if I have perfect intercooling, T1 equal to T5. And T6 equal to, in the same way here, this is 6. Okay, this is 6. So T1 by T2, T2 by T1 I can find out from the P2 by P1 relation. And T6 by T5 I can find out by delivery pressure by intermediate pressure to the power of n minus 1 by n. So like that, I can find out what are the temperatures. Okay, T6 and T2 are found out. And then the power required to drive the compressor, that is n by n minus 1, MR. Here, instead of writing in terms of pressure ratios, we are writing T2 minus T1 and T6 minus T5. We got in that way only, right? RT2 minus RT1, we have written P2 V2 minus P1 V1 and taken the common and all. So we can do this way, or you can use the pressure ratios, right? So T2 minus T1 and T6 minus T5, I can find out what is the amount of power required. And mass of air delivered per stroke. So this is because RPM is given 300 RPM and per second per stroke by 60, I can get this. And volume of free air per stroke. Again, this PV by RT you can use, and you can find out what is the meter cube. And stroke volume pi by 4 d square L, if L and D are the length and diameter of the L cylinder. So this is equated to and okay, then I can find out what is, because D in the problem it is given D is equal to L. You have to find out the low pressure cylinder dimensions if L equal to D. So I can get D square L as D cube, right? Or you can write L cube. And so this cube root of this, you will get this. So in this way, I can get the dimensions of LP cylinder. And isothermal power required, again, MRT1 by MRT1 into log P2 by P1. I know all the values I can find out, and I can get the isothermal efficiency. That is isothermal power by actual power, 18.484 here. In that way, I can find out the isothermal efficiency. Okay, this is the way we can find out or solve the problems of reciprocating compressors. And as I told, you can go through mainly this 18th chapter of PKNOG. And actually, these two problems also are taken from PKNOG. And there are further problems which you can go through. And there are small things which I have to cover. And when we have taken the entropy change relations, right, in terms of temperature ratio, pressure ratio, and volume ratio, if I have gases, I use that. But if I have liquids or solids, liquids and solids are incompressible. So that's why dV equal to 0. ds is equal to du plus pdv, TdS is equal to, so ds is du by t plus pdv by t. So this will be 0. So this is cv dt by t. And if I differentiate that, I will get cv log t2 by t1. Here, another thing for liquids and solids is there will not be separate Cp and Cv. There is only one specific heat. Okay, so we use some average specific heat, and S2 minus S1 is C log T2 by T1. Okay, this is the one we use. Let's see, if I have isentropic process means S2 minus S1 is 0, and this is 0. This is 0 means T2 equal to T1. So for solids and liquids, isothermal process and isentropic process are same. There is no difference. Okay, this is one important observation you can make. And another thing we have discussed about the isentropic efficiencies of steady flow devices like nozzles or steam turbines or gas turbines or centrifugal compressors, axial flow compressors. These are all steady flow devices. And one thing, because these are turbo machines, these turbo machines are very high speed machines, very high speed machines. When the speeds are very high, there will not be any time for heat transfer. So the ideal process is, the actual process is adiabatic. And if I want the process to be ideal, it is isentropic. So isentropic process is the ideal process. And in reciprocating compressors, because they are very slow, the ideal process there is isothermal process. That's why the efficiency there, we call them as isothermal efficiency. In turbo machines, we use what is called as isentropic efficiency or adiabatic efficiency. Okay, so this is one of the important thing you have to know. And so as I told, there can be expansion or compression. In the turbines, there will be expansion. So if it is ideal, it is isentropic expansion. This is high pressure and this is low pressure. So there is expansion, isentropic expansion from high pressure to low pressure. Isentropic means vertical line on a TS diagram or HS diagram, right? Because H and T are same for compressible flows. Okay. So here, if it is isentropic, it comes straight, and because of the irreversibilities, there will be increase in the entropy, and it goes like this. So this is the actual process. This is the ideal process. And the difference in enthalpy is the work. So this is the actual work, and this is the ideal work. So ideal work is more, actual work is less from the turbine. So I get less work because of the losses. So actual turbine work by isentropic turbine work, right? WA by WS. And so this is nothing but H1 minus H2A by H1 minus H2S, right? This 2A, 2 actual, 2 isentropic, 2S. Okay, so H1 minus H2A by H1 minus H2S for turbines. And you will get a similar one for nozzle also, but this is not work there. This is kinetic energy, right? Enthalpy is converted to kinetic energy there. In turbines, enthalpy is converted to work. So that is the difference. So if I go to, so similar thing, there is nothing, and that is some practical example. If I have 3 megapascal and 50 kilopascal, it is expanded. So it is coming like this, right? So this is the way I get the efficiency. And for the compressors and pumps, it goes up because it is compressed, right? So from low pressure to high pressure, this is ideal isentropic, and this is actual. And so this is ideal work is this, and the actual work is this. That is more. So the actual work that I have to supply to run the compressor or a pump is more than the ideal work. So we define what is called as the compressor efficiency isentropic work by actual work. So isentropic is H2S minus H1 and actual is H2A minus H1. Okay, so this is the way. And for a pump, H is written in terms of VdP, okay, V into P2 minus P1 and by H into H2A minus H1. So this is for compressor and here one thing, okay, so can't we use isothermal efficiency in turbine? Okay, so sometimes it may be used. It depends on whether you are providing cooling or not. So there is a possibility of providing cooling continuously by circulating water over this. Okay, so though the time is less for the flow to be here during the fast things, still there can be heat transfer, and at that time I have to compare with isothermal compression, right? So if there is no cooling, we define isentropic efficiency. If there is cooling in turbo machine, then I have to use isothermal efficiency. But in general, it is very rare to be used. Okay, so this is not that practical to circulate water over the compressor or a turbine. Okay, so it is just to have an idea. Is it possible to use isothermal efficiency in compressor? Okay, so a realistic model process for compressors that are intentionally cooled during the compression process is the reversible isothermal process. Then I can have isothermal efficiency. So Wi isothermal work by compressor, the actual work. Okay, but in general, there will not be anything like this. So the ideal one is isentropic work, and the actual, then it will be not isentropic but actual. Okay, so that is the difference. And nozzle, this is compressor, anyhow I already told. So nozzle, it is just similar to the turbine. Okay, so isentropic expansion and actual expansion. So here the enthalpy is converted to kinetic energy. So if it is ideal, I will have more velocity because this is more V square by 2. So V2A will be more. And in the actual expansion, V2A will be less. And so the nozzle efficiency is actual kinetic energy at nozzle exit by isentropic kinetic energy at nozzle exit, right? So it is again the same thing, H1 minus H2A by H1 minus H2A. So this formula is same as the turbine. Okay, the same thing is again. Okay, this is about, this we have discussed already, that is isentropic efficiency of compressors, turbines, nozzles, diffusers and all, right? And here we try to see how a Rankine cycle works, which you have already studied in your BME, right? So it is just a recollection of that, and we will see how to solve a Rankine cycle problem, because here we use the steam tables. Okay, so here first it if you take state 1, it enters the pump. Okay, so the pump, in the pump it is isentropically, these are turbo machines. This pump and turbine are turbo machines, so they are high-speed machines, and the ideal compression is isentropic compression. Okay, so it is isentropically compressed to high pressure. This is a constant pressure line, low pressure line. This is a constant pressure line, high pressure line. From low pressure to high pressure, it is compressed in the pump. So 1 to 2, this is the compression. And here, constant pressure heat addition. In all these steady flow machines, like steam turbine, gas turbine and all, heat transfers take place isobarically, right? Heat transfer, heat addition and heat rejection, both processes will be isobars. And compression and expansion are isentropics because these are high-speed machines. Okay, so this you have to remember. So there will be 2 isentropic processes, that is in compression and expansion, 2 isobaric processes, heat addition and heat rejection. I told there will be 4 processes: heat addition, heat rejection, compression and expansion. Compression and expansion are isentropic, heat addition and heat rejection are isobaric, constant pressure. Okay, so here 2 to 3, it will be heated, and so first it will be sensible heat, and then evaporation, latent heat, and again sensible heat. I will get superheated steam here. So I get the superheated steam here, then that is sent to turbine, which is expanded. Okay, so isentropic expansion until again it reaches the same pressure, low pressure. And then I have to complete the cycle. That's why I have sent it to the condenser. So I have to bring it back and I have to condense it and to complete the cycle. So I have condenser where I lose heat at constant pressure. So this is the Rankine cycle, right? And if you see the Rankine cycle, and if I want to increase the efficiency or the work, right? So what are the ways to increase this? So there are three ways. Either you push it up, that is increase the boiler pressure, or push it down by decreasing the condenser pressure. I push this towards right. That is, I will get high superheat. Okay, superheating, if I do it high, so I can go and increase the area. Okay, there are three ways of increasing the efficiency of the Rankine cycle: by increasing the boiler pressure, by decreasing the condenser pressure, by increasing the superheat. Okay, so these things you have to remember. Is everything clear in the Rankine cycle? Any doubts in the Rankine cycle? Hope people are listening. Okay, Akshay. Okay, Mahendra, thank you. Shivam. Right, Vamsi Krishna. Okay, now we will see how to solve a problem. So here, what data you will normally given is the condenser pressure will be given, boiler pressure will be given, and how much is the superheat temperature will be given to you. Okay, and so this can be anywhere. Suppose it can be here also, and the line will be like this. If it is here, it will be like this. Here, if it is here, it will be like this. Okay, so in that way you will have. And another important thing is, in each process, there will be only heat transfer or only work transfer. Okay, so here there is work transfer in the pump and heat transfer in the boiler and work transfer in the turbine and heat transfer in the condenser. And if heat transfer is there, work transfer is not there. And if you remember the first law of thermodynamics, where delta Q is equal to dH plus d of KE plus d of PE plus delta W, d of KE, d of PE completely zero in all the complete cycle. So I have delta Q, dH and delta W. And in delta Q and delta W, only one of them exists, right? So whether you want heat transfer or work transfer, it is just a change in enthalpy. Change in enthalpy gives all the four, right? Suppose if I want work required by the pump, so H2 minus H1, that is W pump. And H3 minus H2 is heat added. H3 minus H4 is work by the turbine. And H4 minus H1 is the heat rejected. Okay, that is very simple. If I get enthalpies at all the points, I can find out what is work of the work needed by the compressor, what is heat added, work developed by the turbine, and work heat rejected. And if I want to have the network, the W turbine minus W pump is the network. And that is also equal to Q added minus Q lost. Okay, so because net heat transfer is equal to net work transfer. And the efficiency, the work done, the network by heat input is the efficiency. So WT minus WP, which gives me network, by Q added is the efficiency. Okay, so that is the way we have to find. And so here, steam at 20 bar and 360 degrees centigrade is expanded in a steam turbine to 0.08 bar. Okay, so that is, here the conditions are given. And this pressure is given, so this pressure is given and this temperature is given. That's what we wanted. Okay, 20 bar, 360 degrees centigrade expanded to 0.08 bar. It then enters a condenser where it is condensed to saturated liquid water. The pump feeds back the water into the boiler. Assuming ideal processes, find the network per kg of steam and the cycle efficiency. Okay, so this is the cycle, and this is for actual cycle. But ideal cycle is all straight 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Okay, I have changed the numbers. Don't get confused. Okay, it doesn't matter whatever it is. And so I have to find out enthalpies at all the points. And here, H1 I can find out because I know 20 bar and 360 degree centigrade. I have to go for the steam tables. So steam tables, superheated tables, you have to go to 20 degrees and 20 bar and 360 degree centigrade. You will get H1 and S1. Okay, H1 and S1 you will get. And similarly, so I can find out the enthalpy here because this is at 0.08 bar, HF is H3. Okay, HF is H3. And okay, these two directly I can get. Now I have to get H2 and H4. How to get H2? So whenever I want to have values here, I have to know the process and I have to know one value. So here I know the pressure and I have to know, I know that it is isentropic process. So because of isentropic, S1 is equal to S2. S1 I can find out from the steam tables. S1 is 6.9917. Okay, and so I can find out what is dryness fraction here, because at this pressure, this is SF, this is SG, and this is the entropy, and S2 minus SF2 by SFG2 will gives me X2. So that is the way I have to find out. So X2S is equal to S2 minus SF by SFG. I will get this. And once I get X2, I can find out H2 because I know HF and HG at 0.08 bar. I can find out what is H2. So H2 is found out. So H1 is known, H2 is known, H3 is known. I want H4. Okay, how to get H4? So I don't know where it is. So this is W pump is H4 minus H3. And here in the pump, because it is liquid, I assume the specific volume is constant. So if specific volume is constant, integral VdP is V into P4 minus P3. I know P4, I know P3, I know specific volume here, VF. So VF at 0.08 bar into P4 minus P3 gives me W pump. W pump is H4 minus H3. So I can, because H3 is known, H4 can be obtained. In that way, I can find out H1, H2, H3, H4. Once I know H1, H2, H3, H4, H1 minus H2 gives turbine work, H1 minus H4 gives QH, and H4 minus H3 pump work. So turbine work minus pump work gives the net work, and net work by the heat supplied, which is H1 minus H4, gives me the efficiency. So like that, I have to find out. So W pump is H4S minus H3, and in that way, H4S is obtained. And W turbine is H1 minus H2S. All the ideal processes I am talking about. So W net is network is equal to WT minus WP, and Q1 is H1 minus H4, and efficiency is equal to W net by QH. So in this way, I can find out the efficiency. Today, unfortunately, I could not connect the whiteboard, so that's why I have to show like this. I thought of doing the problem on the board. Okay, and this extension can be given if the efficiencies are, if the turbine and pump have each 80% efficiency, find the percentage reduction in the network and the cycle efficiency. So what I have to do, because I know the pump work ideal work and pump turbine work ideal work, and so actual work will be more here. So I have to divide by efficiency to get the actual work. And here, this is the ideal work which I have calculated. If I want the actual work, you have to multiply by 0.8 to get the actual turbine work. So then I have to find out the difference. That's what it is done here. So if eta P is 80%, eta T is 80%, WP is ideal work by 0.8. This is this. And the turbine work, ideal work into 0.8. This is this. And difference of these two will give me network. And the previous network is 969 and present actual work is 774. I can find out what is the reduction in the work. Okay. So in the same way, now H4S, right? Because pump work is different. If I add, that is, so here I want this, okay? If I want to have this work I have to take, okay, actual work. So you have to add H3 plus the actual work, I will get H4. Okay, then I can find out the heat added. So that is the way H4 I got, and Q1 is equal to 3159.3 minus this, and that gives me heat supplied. And now this is the output, and this is the heat input. I can get the efficiency. And the previous efficiency is 32.5%, and here 25.97%. I can find out what is the reduction in the efficiency, and percentage I can find out. Okay, this is the way I have to solve a problem. An actual Rankine cycle and an ideal Rankine cycle. To find out each, only thing, again, just quickly I will repeat, I have to find out enthalpies at each and every point. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. And this can be obtained straight using the saturation tables at this pressure, find out HF. And here you can find out from the superheated tables, because both pressure and temperature are given, you can find out this. And then because entropy also you find out, same entropy will be here. And so I have to find out, it may be outside or it may be inside. If it is outside, it will be in the superheated tables. If it is inside, it will be in the saturated tables. So I have to find out dryness fraction here. So using this SF and SG, I find out the dryness fraction. And using HF and HG, I can find out what is the enthalpy here. And here, the pump work I have to take, V into P2 minus P1 gives me pump work. And to H1, I have to add pump work so that I can get this. So in this way, I get all the 4 enthalpies, and the difference in all the 4 enthalpies will give me the heat transfers and work transfers, from which I get the efficiency. Is it okay? Any questions? Okay, Shivam, thank you. No doubts? So Rankine cycle you can solve. Okay, then the time is getting over. We will go to the story. Yeah. Yeah, it is an interesting story, right? You'll like it. And one professor has written this, and he has written, some time ago, I received a call from a colleague who asked if I would be the referee on the grading of an examination question. Okay, it's something happened in a university, in a science college. It seemed that he was about to give a student a 0 for his answer to a physics question, while the student is claiming to receive a perfect score and would do so if the system were not set up against the student. So he is giving, he wants to give to 0 mark for that, and that fellow is asking for a perfect score for that, and there is a problem with them. And so they asked an arbiter, a referee, to go through the problem and solve it. So the instructor and the student agreed to submit this to an impartial arbiter, and I was selected. Okay, the problem is, I went to my colleague's office and read the examination question, which was, show how it is possible to determine the height of a tall building with the aid of a barometer. So using a barometer, how to find out the height of the tall building. Okay, so will anybody answer this? How to find out the height of a tall building using a barometer? Very good, Vamsi Krishna. Anything else? And remember, Vamsi Krishna, it is a physics exam. Okay, I think you know the story. That's why you are giving different answers. And usually, because it is a fixed physics question, right? So these answers are not physics answers, because the pressure varies with the height. So the professor is expecting that He'll use the barometer at the ground level and at the top level. Based on the pressure difference, he can find out what is the height. So that's what it is expected. Okay, then the student's answer was, take the barometer to the top of the building, attach a long rope to it, lower the barometer to the street, and then bring it up, measure the length of the rope, and the length of the rope is the height of the building. Okay, that's what he has written. Okay, and the professor is not interested to give any mark to that because there is no physics in it. So now this is a very interesting answer, but should the student get credit for it? If I pointed out that the student really had a strong case for full credit, because definitely you can find out the height, since he had answered the question completely and correctly. On the other hand, if full credit were given to him, it could well contribute to a high grade for the student in his physics course. A high grade is supposed to certify that the student knows some physics, but the answer to the question did not confirm this, right? And with this in mind, I suggested that the student have another try at answering the question, right? Thinking that he may come with some physics answer. I was not surprised that my colleague agreed to this, but I was surprised that the student did. Or the student also accepted. He surprised he may not accept like that. No, I think okay, acting in terms of the agreement, I gave the student 6 minutes to answer the question, with the warning that the answer should show some knowledge of physics. So that is a condition. At the end of 5 minutes, he had not written anything. I asked him if he wished to give up, since I had another class to take care of. But he said no, he was not giving up. He had many answers to this problem. He was just thinking of the best one. So he says, I have many answers. I'm thinking which is the best one to answer. I excused myself for interrupting him and asked him to please go on. In the next minute, he dashed off with the answer. Okay, he has given this answer, right? Take the barometer to the top of the building and lean over the edge of the roof. Drop the barometer, timing its fall with a stopwatch. Then use the formula half AT square, S is equal to half AT square, calculate the height of the building. And sorry for the barometer. So the barometer is gone, right? So that's what he has given the answer. But there is physics in it. At this point, I asked my colleague if he would give up, because still he didn't get the answer that he is expecting. But he cannot say it is a wrong answer. So he conceded, and I gave the student almost full credit. In leaving my colleague's office, I recalled that the student had said he had other answers to the problem. So I asked him what they were. Oh yes, said the student, there are many ways of getting the height of a tall building with the aid of a barometer. For example, you could take the barometer out on a sunny day and measure the height of the barometer, the length of its shadow, and the length of the shadow of the building. And by the use of simple proportions, that is similar triangles, determine the height of the building. Okay, fine, I said. Okay, here also, this is also okay, right? And in the others, yes, said the student, this is a very basic measurement method that you will like. In this method, you take the barometer and begin to walk up the stairs. As you climb the stairs, you mark up the lengths of the barometer along the wall. You then count the number of marks, and this will give you the height of the building in barometer units. How many barometers heights, okay? And it's a direct method, he said. Of course, if you want a more sophisticated method, you can tie the barometer to the end of a string, swing it like a pendulum, and determine the value of G at the street level and at the top of the building. And from the difference between the two values of G, the height of the building can be in principle calculated. Okay, so finally he concluded, if you don't limit me to physics solutions to this problem, there are many other answers, such as taking the barometer to the basement and knocking on the owner's door. When the owner answers, you speak to him as follows. Dear Mr. Owner, here I have a very fine barometer. If you will tell me the height of this building, I will give you this barometer. Okay, so that is the way. At this point, I asked the student if he really didn't know the answer to the problem, because he didn't get the problem that he is expecting. Then he admitted that he did. He knows it, but that he was so fed up with college instructors trying to teach him how to think and to use critical thinking, instead of showing him the structure of the subject matter, that he decided to take off on what he regarded mostly as a sham. And this boy, this great boy, is none other than the great Nobel laureate Niels Bohr. Okay, so that's why I wanted to tell this particular story on this day. It is his birthday. Okay, thank you very much. We'll meet again in the next class. I think tomorrow 8 to 9. So we'll have some more problems. And I think if the board is ready, I will do problems on that and I will ask you the values. Okay. Thank you. See you. If there is any more questions, people can come with that.